Welcome back, everyone. I'm Alex Witt here at MSNBC World Headquarters in New York at 38 past the hour. Let's get a bit more on the Trump-Clinton showdown. To do that, we bring back Hugh Hewitt, host of the Hugh Hewitt Show on Salem Radio Network and an MSNBC political analyst. And Hugh, before we even get to that, quickly I want your comment on the fact that it's confirmed Hillary Clinton met for 3.5 hours and had that FBI interview about the email server, which you so aptly are always pointing out that detail. It's not about emails, it's about her server placement.
This is a very significant development because the last person interviewed is usually, but not always, the target of the investigation, the subject of most interesting, intense focus by the Bureau. On the other hand, I wouldn't expect it to wrap up quickly. Former Secretary of State Clinton deleted 33,000 emails and then attempted to destroy the server, wipe it. And so the FBI forensic people have to see what they can recover to find out what in fact was deleted, whether it was wrongfully stored in the first place and whether or not it was wrongfully deleted. And so there's a lot of time left. I wouldn't be looking for either an indictment or a clearance from the Bureau anytime soon necessarily, unless she's in very deep trouble, which is in fact possible if she violated 18 U.S.C. 1001, the False Statement Act, or 18 U.S.C. 1924, which obtains to handling classified information.
Okay, all that, though, very much remains to be seen. I do want to ask you about this. Hugh, in the space of a week or so, you went from comparing Trump to stage 4 cancer to writing an endorsement of him in the Washington Post. What changed?
I didn't compare Donald Trump to
you
stage 4 cancer.
His rise is like ignoring stage 4 cancer. You can't do it. You got to go attack it.
I was talking specifically and at length about the attacks on the judge. I also compared it to the plane flying to the mountain. I was apoplectic about the attacks over the judge and demanded that they stop or the campaign would hemorrhage and with it the Republican Party. Great news is that he stopped those attacks. He made changes in his campaign, and now he does what he ought to have been doing, I think, consistently, which is to frame this as a binary choice between a very irresponsible Secretary of State who failed in Egypt and Libya and Syria with the status of forces agreement, who threatens the Supreme Court and who has this server issue, as opposed to attacks on a federal judge in a case in which he's a litigant. So I'm very happy that they treated that stage 4 cancer of the attacks on the judge, and I'm glad they've changed direction, and that makes it a very competitive race, as polls out this week showed. I
want to ask you quickly before I let you go, despite the fact that you've said a Trump presidency would destroy the GOP, were he to become president in November, what do you think the GOP looks like in 2017 or 18?
The GOP is very resilient, like the conservatives in Great Britain. They have a terrific bench. No matter what happens in November, whether it's President Trump or President Clinton, the bench is with the Republicans, with 31 governors, with amazing senators, with people as talented as Theresa May, Michael Gove, and Liam Fox are in Great Britain. Those kinds of conservatives are plentiful across the United States.
Okay, our MSNBC analyst, Hugh Hewitt. Always good to see you. Thank you, Hugh.
Thanks,
We're going to get more now on the breaking news that Hillary Clinton has met with the FBI this morning. Joining me to talk about the developments, Caleb Mason, former federal prosecutor and a law professor. Caleb, with a welcome, let's talk about what has just happened. Give me your thoughts on the fact that it's been confirmed and where you think things stand.
Well, I would agree with your prior guest that the interview with Mrs. Clinton would suggest that most of the rest of the investigation has been done. Certainly, there may be more analysis that the FBI would have to do. Where I would disagree with him is in his comments about the necessity of the Attorney General's recusal. That may be a political issue. I certainly don't see it as a legal one or an ethical one. That she had a meeting with Bill Clinton. That doesn't surprise or trouble me at all from the point of the integrity of the investigation.
Let's talk about, based on your experience, what do you think happened today? What kind of questions do you think Hillary Clinton were volleyed to her?
I would imagine that the questions had to do with confirming information that the FBI had obtained from many, many other sources over the course of these investigations and seeing if Secretary Clinton had a different answer or confirmed these answers. The reference to your prior guest made to 1001, False Statements Act, often when you finally interview the subject or the target of an investigation, many of the questions will pertain to topics that the agents already know the answers to. that leads to sometimes, as I guess most famously in the case of Dennis Hastert, former Speaker of the House, you end up with ultimately charges for making false statements to investigators when the investigators already knew the answers to the questions. I can't imagine anything like that would happen here. I don't think there are any more unanswered questions about where her email server was, where her emails were routed, and so forth. So I think they would probably just want to make sure that they had closed the loop and nailed down any potential loose ends or pieces of information that they didn't already know.
For 3.5 hours?
3.5 hours is really not that long. I mean, you know, this is a voluntary interview. She's not, as far as I know, been subpoenaed to appear before a grand jury. So I think there's no indication that that's, you know, shows that there was some kind of smoking gun that they were looking for, or information that they had not already learned. You could easily go for several days in this type of an investigation if you really wanted to take every fact and every piece of paper that you'd obtained over the last 5 years, put them in front of her and say, yes or no, do you agree with this? Do you remember this? Yeah, you could take a week.
I'd love to get, Caleb, your assessment as to how long you think it's going to take to wrap this thing up, to get a definitive statement there, because in an investigation like this, if indeed Mrs. Clinton is the final interviewee or very close to the end there, in an investigation like this, would the FBI be putting together all the pieces of the puzzle as they go along, or do they wait until it's all done and then start working on a condensed version of an answer, or what they're going to do going forward?
Right. So the FBI is working with the Justice Department, and the Justice Department has a public integrity section that would probably be the one in charge of this, with, I would imagine, several career trial attorneys who would have been supervising the investigation the entire time. There would be a recommendation coming from the FBI and from those career prosecutors as to whether or not the evidence warrants any charges. That would then have to go, probably in this case, to the deputy AG, would be my guess, to make a recommendation as to whether or not to bring an indictment. The FBI does not make that decision. That's a decision made by career prosecutors. As for a timeline on that, could be a week, could be a month. I mean, my guess is that they at least recognize that we have an election coming up. And it is and always has been DOJ policy to try to avoid having criminal investigations interfere with the electoral process. That could cut either way. I mean, you could say, well, let's make the decision more quickly so that it's resolved one way or another.
So, Caleb, how much do you think the fact that our Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, as you said, you know, this is probably going to go up to the Assistant or Deputy Attorney General. The fact that she has said, I'm going to let whatever the recommendation is stand. When we go back and review all this, is that itself going to be a problem? Will that be something of speculation, or conspiracy theorists or the like who are going to say, well, the Attorney General removed herself, so there's still a little loophole here?
I imagine it already is the subject of speculation and conspiracy theories. You know, from the moment the former president got off the plane, I think we were doomed to years of conspiracy theories about what they talked about. I mean, my take on that is very simple. There is just nothing wrong with a social visit with the former president if you're the Attorney General. Obviously, there are many things wrong if, in fact, the former president said, you know, I'm offering you something in exchange for declining prosecution here. But there's absolutely no suggestion from anybody that they had that kind of a conversation. So it's unfortunate that the mere fact that they met has led to this sort of speculation. But it certainly does not indicate that there's any kind of impropriety. And her recusal is, or I mean, if you even want to call it that, her statement that she is going to follow the FBI recommendation, that's obviously an astute and I think commendable decision on her part, just to avoid further public speculation and to maybe try and slow down the rumor mill a little bit. I certainly don't think it says anything one way or another as to whether or not there was anything improper about the meeting with Mr. Clinton. As far as I can tell, there wasn't.
All right, I want to read the statement again, and this was released to everyone by the Hillary Clinton campaign, and here it is. Secretary Clinton gave a voluntary interview this morning about her email arrangements while she was secretary. She is pleased to have had the opportunity to assist the Department of Justice in bringing this review to a conclusion. Out of respect for the investigative process, she will not comment further on her interview. So that all makes sense to you, Caleb, no doubt. Again, timeline, you say it's hard for you to speculate how long, though, with regard to an election. I mean, certainly that is something that's going to be weighing down on the FBI and on the Justice Department and in getting this wrapped up. Do you think it can be done so thoroughly in time to have an election that's free of any sort of implication of impropriety?
Well, sure. I mean, given the fact that multiple federal agencies have been investigating this precise question for some years now, I don't think there's a lot of factual work to be done. It's now just a question of making the final recommendation and moving forward from that. There could be criminal charges brought. There could be a formal declination and an announcement of that. With respect to the timing, what DOJ is going to want to avoid is a investigation or an indictment or declination decision that is timed so close to the election as to interfere with it. I mean, that's something that you always want to look at. My guess would be, and this is completely a guess, is that there would be quite a strong impetus to try and make the decision and to publicly announce it as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Caleb, stand by, will you? I'm going to bring right now into the conversation MSNBC.com's Alex Seitzwald. Alex, what do you have relative to this latest breaking news?
Well, Alex, definitely a major development in this long ongoing saga around Hillary Clinton's private email server that she used as Secretary of State. We had not been given warning that this interview would happen. There, as recently as Wednesday, Clinton's campaign had told us that they had no contact with the FBI, and then the Saturday of the July 4th weekend, a bit of a surprise. Potentially hoping that the news will get a little bit buried by the holiday weekend. On Tuesday, she's campaigning with Barack Obama, which will obviously get a lot of attention. And they're saying, they're not going to comment further on this. So really hoping to move past this as quickly as possible. But this is still a major step. I mean, a major party nominee interviewed by the FBI for 3.5 hours on her private email server, and no word on when that investigation will conclude. FBI Director James Comey has said that the Democratic National Convention is not a deadline for him, so we still don't know when this will be able to be put behind her.
This could be percolating, for some time yet. Alex, thank you for that. My colleague NBC's Andrea Mitchell